And thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. We're very excited for the content we've prepared for you today and really happy to have you join us. And we're just going to wait a few more minutes just to let everyone just get logged in and get their audio set up. So just sit tight for 1 second and we will be starting the webinar shortly. All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're just going to give everyone just another minute here to jump into the chat to jump into the webinar and make sure they've got audio and everything set up here. So please just hold tight. If anyone's interested, you can pop into the chat section where you're joining us from. We're located here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and we've got a beautiful day outside. So if you're coming to us from somewhere else in the world, feel free to pop that in the chat so we can see where everyone's joining us from today. Oh, I'm sorry. It looks like we actually can't pop that in the chat, but in the questions tab. So feel free to pop that in there so we can say hi and know where you're joining us from. And we'll just wait just another minute here to let everyone get in settled. All right, we've got Ranjith joining us from India. Welcome, Ranjith. Right, we've got Gordon coming from DCA. Excellent. All right, well, I think we can get started now. We're just 2 minutes past, so thank you so much for everyone for taking the time to join us today. We are incredibly excited about the content that we've prepared. And today we'll be talking about how to unlock the RPA market. And so by that we mean how you can migrate bots from one RPA platform to another to drive increased business value. Just some notes on housekeeping before we get started here. So you can pop any questions that you have at any point in the webinar just into that question tab, and we'll be answering all of them at the end of the webinar. Our content here should run around 40-45 minutes about, so we should have you out before the top of the next hour. And if you just check out that handout section of your control panel, you'll see a data sheet in there. And that's a really great resource we just wanted to leave behind for everyone so that you can see a little bit more about our functionality of how we can help migrate bots from any RPA platform to any other platform. So that being said, I'd love to introduce our speaker this afternoon. We have Matt Dodgson, who is our Global Solutions Engineering, or Head of Global Solution Engineering here at Blueprint. And Matt, we'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Kate. And I appreciate everyone taking time to join us today. So I want to welcome you all for joining us, and we're going to talk to you about how we can unlock the entire RPA market by simplifying this idea of migration of these digital workforces and digital workers from one RPA platform to another. And this helps us drive greater business value for your automation initiatives. And it's a topic that's definitely gaining a lot of steam for reasons that we'll get into in just a moment. All right. So as Kate mentioned, my name is Matthew Dodgson. I head up the global solution engineering team here at Blueprint. I support the delivery of Blueprint's enterprise automation suite, which is this modern, intuitive platform for scaling process automation initiatives to the enterprise. And at Blueprint, we believe in delivering quality solutions to customers that drive change and value for the organization. And we're passionate about helping teams to rapidly optimize, automate, and digitally transform their organizations. A little bit of my background: I actually come from a background of customer service, quality assurance, software engineering, and even product management. So I've seen firsthand, the best solutions require dedication, passion, and support from the whole team. And ultimately, what supports all of them best is platforms and technology that really help empower them and enable them effectively. So before we get started, I want to frame everything we're going to be talking about today. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about Blueprint and what it is we do. Then we'll get right into today's topic and explain why there's a fast-growing interest of RPA platform migration and how to know if migration might be right for you and your organization. And we'll also go over why it's historically been a challenge to switch RPA tools, and ultimately how Blueprint is going to remove those challenges while adding value to your bot ecosystem in the process. And for that, I'll be leading you through a demo of exactly how to extract an existing automation from your current RPA platform into Blueprint, creating what we call a digital blueprint of that digital worker. And then we're going to talk about how we can optimize and validate those digital blueprints before exporting them to a new RPA solution to complete the replatforming, and ultimately how leveraging Blueprint in tandem with your RPA tools enables you to design, build, and manage high-value automations with speed and precision that you need to really scale and scope out the ROI of your RPA initiatives. So starting off, I'd like to give you a little bit more context about Blueprint. Today, we're going to be focusing on how Blueprint enables faster, simplified RPA platform migrations, but that's really just one use case for our solution. At a higher level, Blueprint is a leading provider of digital process design and management solutions to the Fortune 1000 organizations. Global leaders from every industry are using our cloud-based platform, the Enterprise Automation Suite, in tandem with their RPA platforms to identify, design, and manage these high-value automations with precision and ease by creating what we call digital blueprints. Now, creating a digital blueprint replaces the need for time-consuming, error-prone documents like the PDD or STD, and it drives both quality and efficiency at numerous points along the automation workflow. So this enables our customers to spend less time designing, managing, or fixing automations and more time on things that directly grow their business. So what do we mean when we say they use us alongside their RPA tool to identify, design, and manage high-value automations? Well, at the heart of our platform is the digital blueprint. And digital blueprints are much more than just process models. They contain everything you need to effectively and efficiently deliver high-quality automations, including detailed process flows, all of those dependencies related to the systems or compliance regulations, functional and non-functional requirements, user stories, test cases, and specific implementation details that are all directly integrated into your RPA platform. Using the Blueprint platform and our digital blueprints has many benefits, including having all the assets and stakeholders in one centralized platform, which ultimately streamlines workflow and improves alignment. So you can move projects forward with speed and precision. We have intelligent recommendations and modeling built into the platform and integrations that really make it faster and easier to design and build automated processes, while also improving the quality of those processes. And our enterprise analytics and dashboard, which really help you prioritize and measure what's working, managing change proactively, and ultimately sharpen and scale your strategy across the organization. Now, building automations with digital blueprints is the state-of-the-art way to achieve RPA success. The system is purpose-built to design automations in a simple, easily understandable way. And as you can see here, identifying things like systems, actions, and parameters for any given automation task doesn't require technical expertise and is accessible to any business user, really starting to enable something we've talked about as citizen designers. But what makes it really powerful and demonstrates the clear superiority of digital design over documents is how the information is transferred directly into your RPA platform to accelerate development and reduce the introduction of error in translating the design to implementation. The ease and simplicity of digital blueprints and now enables, will allow and truly unlock things like those citizen developer movement. But in all honesty, it really enables more of this citizen designer, where this platform is more readily available to drive your automation pipeline and really scale your RPA programs. Now, this is possible because digital blueprints are also loaded with other capabilities. They provide a centralized repository of referential automation design, and this is information that's never out of date, unlike documents. They are highly configurable, and they can be tied into a highly configurable review and approval workflow to ensure our stakeholders are engaged on the elements that are most relevant to them. Another totally differentiating capability is to transform the process models within your digital blueprint into a myriad of different value-added work products that can accelerate automation implementation. For example, we can automatically take a digital blueprint and generate all of the functional tests and user stories for a process, so your team can focus their time on high-value activities and not sitting there and writing stories and test cases from scratch based on a PD they just created. With that, let's dive into today's topic. So there's no denying it, RPA is undeniably red hot these days, and for obvious reasons. So we won't get into that specifically, but there is a stark underside to the cost reduction, efficiency, and increased quality that RPA adoption promised. And here's the rundown. When RPA first came about, it was positioned as a self-contained solve-all for business inefficiencies. And it was so simple that companies could even provide a bot for every worker out there. But rolling out and maintaining an army of bots is actually a tremendous challenge. And too often the industry doesn't acknowledge the realities of this challenge. Because of these glossed over challenges, over 50% of RPA projects fail to meet their objectives, while 25% of companies have not achieved the break-even point or even returned enough hours to the company to pay for their initial RPA investment. But why? What's going wrong? What's causing this? Now, as organizations race to automate more and more processes, they're hitting a wall. Missed requirements and poorly designed processes are leading to low quality, brittle automations that need consistent and constant maintenance. And these tedious and expensive changes and fixes are highly reactive, which means that bot downtime is leading to diminishing returns in business value, as well as the inability to scale automation initiatives because you're too busy putting out fires. You have no time to actually build the new bots you need to prioritize. To address the underwhelming ROI and challenges RPA programs are encountering, one solution that is becoming more and more common by the day is migrating to another RPA platform to realize the returns that they were promised. That's the overarching reason, but if we dig a little deeper, there are several reasons that are driving the desire to switch RPA platforms as well. At a closer look, what's really fueling RPA programs looking to switch platforms can be boiled down to these four reasons. The first is a failure to get value. RPA programs have been unable to scale automation or realize the ROI they were promised because they're too busy putting out fires. They've been burdened with crippling maintenance issues and RPA downtime due to ineffective development and design practices that produce low quality bots. The result has been negligent returns, triggering the question, did we pick the wrong RPA tool? Another strong motivator is unfulfilled promises. RPA vendors have overpromised and underdelivered on the ease of RPA implementation. The illusion that citizen developers could drive automation never materialized, and instead expose many fragile automations. Now organizations want to try their luck with a different approach that includes another RPA provider. Third, we have organizations are looking to eliminate islands of automation. Some companies have inadvertently set up disconnected independent automation initiatives within different business lines. The consequences are a lack of quality, different automation design practices, and ultimately inflated costs by unnecessarily doubling down on multiple RPA tools. In this case, migrating bots into one RPA tool is a way to consolidate all their automations into a single platform to cut costs and streamline higher quality RPA development. But lastly, number 4, there's also incompatible version upgrades that are frustrating RPA programs. For example, there's a large segment of Automation Anywhere customers that are still on version 11 and have faced significant challenges upgrading to the newer A2019 or Now it's formerly known, or now it's now it is known as A360. But with the end of maintenance for things like V11 right around the corner, customers have been forced to rebuild bots from scratch in the A360 platform, or look elsewhere for help, or try their hand at the migration utility. Even with all these valid reasons driving the desire to switch RPA vendors, migrating digital workforces has been nearly impossible because of the effort and costs involved. Because each RPA platform describes process automations in their own way, a bot built in one platform can't be run in another, can't even be transferred easily. Historically, the only way of switching was to rebuild your bots in the new target platform. A prospect so expensive and time-consuming, it was shot down before it could even get off the ground. In an informal poll that we performed on LinkedIn recently, this is exactly what we wanted to verify. We asked respondents what the biggest barriers to switching RPA platforms were. By far, as you can see, the cost of switching was the biggest blocker, while we saw significant representation for other barriers like incompatible bots and the user management effort that would be needed from switching. Now, historically, that was the case, but Blueprint has developed a very unique capability that I'm going to demonstrate for you guys today. Due to the bidirectional integration and the bidirectional connection that we've established with all of the major RPA platforms, Blueprint also has the unique capability to support migrating these automations across platform. We can reverse engineer a digital blueprint from an existing automation and then export that to a new target platform. This is a different approach, and ultimately, it's a much more revolutionary approach. Excuse me. It's a much more revolutionary approach as opposed to looking at things like, I want to migrate code. This actually focuses on migrating the design. And ultimately, this dramatically lowers the switching costs to enable you to move to a new platform of your choice, or simply to consolidate your automations if you already have multiple platforms. Now, before I get into the demo, I want to give you just some context on how Blueprint is able to do this. And what makes this all possible is something we call our Common Object Model Framework, or as we call it, COM for short. This COM provides an increasing catalog of services that form the granular building blocks of automation. Ultimately, it looks across all of the RPA platforms and has centralized the common commands and the common sets of commands that are always used. When you import a bot from a leading RPA platform, Blueprint converts those process automations, including their services, actions, and parameters, into our common object model. There's a whole mapping set of mapping rules that actually facilitate that conversion. From there, you can then further optimize that process automation in Blueprint by connecting it to any overlooked dependencies or optimizing the process, refactoring, redesigning it, all things that tend to happen as we think about moving automations and migrating them. Then, when you take this digital blueprint and you export that over into the new target RPA tool that you want to switch to, all of these services, their specific actions and parameters are mapped directly into your automation development environment through our bidirectional connection with things like Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, Power Automate, and UiPath. The reality is there's no other platform on the market that has anything like this, especially when you consider how it accelerates migration, but most importantly, how it helps reduce migration costs. And those switching costs can be quite substantial, as you see from this analysis. So here we took we did an analysis with quite a few customers, and we broke down the different stages of actually doing the migration. Without Blueprint, migrating robots is very time intensive and it's extremely manual. You know, interpreting what has been built on your RPA platform and how to re-implement a digital worker on another vendor's platform is often a non-trivial exercise. But with our ability to extract a full digital blueprint from those robots, we can actually reduce the effort by as much as 75%. When you start looking at the details of how we go through the stages of interpreting, design, implementing, and testing, there's significant improvements that are made across the board. And ultimately, this leads to that, 75% reduction of effort. And ultimately, it gets people focused on the true value at hand, which is getting that bot working in the target RPA system, as opposed to the manual effort today, which is a lot of times just trying to understand what the heck the bot is currently doing. Again, simplifying and accelerating migrations while cutting costs is only one use case. Blueprint can be used to radically improve the entire lifecycle of your digital workers. All of that detailed process information and dependencies that we capture in digital blueprints provides the basis for the ongoing management of an automation across its lifecycle. We leverage that information to provide comprehensive analytics and impact analysis reporting so you can actually prevent outages when things change, which they invariably do. This leads to automations that can have increased productivity and substantially reduce total cost of ownership because high quality automations built with digital blueprints don't result in endless value draining break fix cycles. And that's also what I'll be highlighting as we run through the demo, which we're going to jump into right now. So not only will I be showing you how you can easily migrate a bot from one RPA tool to another, but I'll also call out how you can improve that bot in the process using Blueprint and drive much greater business value for your RPA efforts. All right, so let's jump into it here. So we're going to start with an automation here in UiPath. This particular automation interacts with native applications like Excel, web, and with an image-based or surface automation. So here, for example, I'll look at one of the processes around SAP. Here's an example of an image-based or surface automation. If I scroll down, let me just scroll over here. If someone is migrating this and they didn't create it, for example, it's going to take effort to figure out what it's doing. Here, for example, is a snippet of some part of a screen, but the screen might have like 100 fields on it, and I can't tell what it is or where it is. To figure that out, I'll need to look at the various properties on the right and backtrack to find the anchor image and figure it all out. And that's just for one step. So you take this one example, and if we were doing this manually, we would probably be walking through this and trying to reverse engineer this bot into a PDD so we can actually explain to somebody and communicate it. Now, I'll show you the first step of how we would migrate this in Blueprint. So first thing I'm going to do is log in here. So here we are in Blueprint. Again, Blueprint is a web-based cloud-hosted solution. So I'm not working with files on my desktop. I'm logging into my environment. I'm logging into my workspace around my automation COE. And what I'm going to do next is actually import that entire project file, that entire project zip from UiPath. So I'm going to grab that one particular project file, and it's going to import the entire project. Here on the left, you should recognize that exact same structure that we just saw in UiPath. Blueprint has automatically imported everything, including the data and reference documents, and even and every XAML file has been automatically converted into a digital blueprint. On import, Blueprint parses all the information brought in and provides some key metrics and information that help you make decisions. For example, if you look at the process at the top of the list, you'll see that it has 264 steps right here. This workflows BP open invoice status 3. In that 264 steps, there's 44 decisions, and it interacts with things like web app, for example. Information like this can really help with decisions as to what to focus on first for this example. And here we're going to jump into one of those things we want to look at, things like this Q2R login. Here is an example of what a XAML file or what one of those workflows in UiPath would convert into. And specifically, this is what we would refer to as a digital blueprint. If I click on one of the steps, it takes so first of all, the digital blueprint takes every step in that automation and it turns it into a unique step in one of these digital blueprint flows. Every single step in this flow, you can see it's not just the process information in terms of the overall sequence of steps, but we actually have all the underlying parameter information as well for each step. So all the actual XAML code and the parameters that are parsed in are actually brought into Blueprint as well. Now let's hop over to a different process for today's example. We're going to go over to this SAP process. Now this is that surface-based or image-based surface automation. Now we need to activate this blueprint to unlock a whole set of powerful features that we can then use. So what I'm going to do is first things first, is I'm going to convert this imported process to a digital blueprint. Now, with all the features available, I'm going to use our intelligent process feature. what this is going to do is this is going to allow me to humanize and make this process a little bit more readable. So the first thing that did was to make this process a little more easier to understand. For example, things like, type in an SAP code into the highlighted area, press enter, type in a doc number, so forth. Blueprint also has the images that are pulled from UiPath. Since this is an image-based automation, all those images were attached to these different blue steps, these system steps. These, of course, go to the responses to help illustrate how the application responds to that digital worker doing things. This makes the process far more understandable for everyone. And if you recall, this allows us to jump directly from a working automation into something that's easily understood and digestible for all users in the matter of minutes. Now, if we don't even know what this process might depend on, we need to understand what are the things, what other things could this impact or affect. This is where we turn to things like intelligent recommendations. Blueprint's actually going to look through and parse all the different automations and information it has across the different bots it's cataloged and start to suggest and recommend things. So based on the information in this process, for example, Blueprint has found a similar process component right here, this SAP T code entered. Also, there happens to be a couple of regulations related to that process it found. And if those are related to the similar process, there's a good chance that they should apply to this one. So if we find something that we want to use, we can simply click on it, and then we can select it and actually just start to link it to this automation at hand. And this is how Blueprint allows you to not only parse and reverse engineer the designs out of these working bots, but then start to do more with it and really start to leverage the collective knowledge and the tribal knowledge that's baked into these automations over the many years you've been working on them. But here, under the relationship tab, we can see how this process is now tied to either regulations, policies, rules, requirements, or even other parts of automation that it may call into. But finally, Blueprint can take this entire set of blueprints that were improved, and it can now automatically populate them into the destination RPA platform. Meaning I can take this entire digital blueprint that we've looked at, and I can now take it and I can actually export it over to Blue Prism in this case. This will take everything we've looked at and it'll package it up into a BP release file that I can then save. And if I move from Blueprint over into Blue Prism, I'm going to sign in here and let's open up this particular automation COE project. Now Blueprint, when it exports and creates this BP release file, it automatically populates that entire digital blueprint, any digital blueprints that you packaged up, into this standard Blue Prism template. Now I'm going to jump into a few of these subflows that we sent over. One is specifically that Q2R login. And here's what that process looks like. So for example, we can see all the detailed steps in that process that were in the digital blueprint have now been turned into detailed steps within Blue Prism, which is great. But if we start to look at these individual shapes and these individual parts of this process, we can see some of the additional details. So for example, if I click on this one item, you can see that variables have come over, like this particular URL for the web application. But for actions, just as a note, if we have actions that we're unable to map, so if in this COM model there was a custom action or a set of actions that we didn't know how to map, that's not a problem. We still send over all of the source XML, all the source code from the original RPA platform. So things like this retry scope notes field is actually where what we'd actually populate. We would create a notes box with actually all the source information. But for others, things that can be mapped, if I open up this things like the open browser, we actually create the needed business objects and map what parameters we're able to. So in every case, Blueprint is providing all of the source information, and the COM model that we were talking about, that COM framework, is actually what's facilitating the mapping of these original commands into the command structure and the parameter structure within something like Blue Prism. Now, if I click on Open Browser again, I'll actually go into the Object Studio here. We can actually go into the business object created in this case, and here it is. And if we click through, we can see the different elements, the different tabs, and the actions that are needed to support this particular process. Now, that was a quick example and a quick overview of really what Blueprint is doing when it comes to migration. But I wanted to give you a bit of context as well. If we fast forward and we think about, the migration or even, building new bots, after we've completed, tests, and deployed those automations, the digital blueprints and the information we brought in, it's going to continue to deliver value throughout the life of that automation. It's really going to help streamline changes and really ensure the continued compliance of these automations. So here, for example, we have the blueprint dashboard, and that's going to notify us of things that are changing that might affect our automations. These notifications are going to be summarized here at the top, and they're broken down by different categories. And so, for example, if we wanted to see things like regulations, we could drill into that. And of those who only want to see things like the high severity, we have one particular regulation we want to look at. But the key here within Blueprint is whenever you have something that's going to change, whether it's a regulation, a system, a requirement, a rule, clicking on that item is going to actually instantly notify you and show you a live impact analysis view. And here you can see truly the change and the impact of that change that it'll have across all the different automations. So this one regulation, when it changes or is going to be subject to change, it could impact and ripple through all of these different automations that we've migrated or actually up and running in Blue Prism or whatever target RPA platform we have moved to. Blueprint can then go a step further and actually alert and notify these owners to take action. So we can then take Blueprint and actually click on this little notification window, pop it up, put in a message, and actually send it out to the owners, letting them know of this change, as well as the teams as to what is going to be coming down and what automations are going to be impacted. And now that the owners have been alerted, we could even switch chairs. In this case here, I'm going to switch over and log in as one of these owners to see my notifications, because on the receiving end, whether I own these processes or I take ownership of them from an RPA COE perspective, as the owner of this particular SAP process, I can see my alert on this own personal dashboard and identifies a particular regulation that's changing and which automation will be impacted that I need to look at and the associated comments that come along with it. So with everything linked, I can now go explore this change and see exactly what it is, and ultimately even navigate into Blue Prism right to the affected part of this automation. And so these digital blueprints serve as a means to translate these automations, but ultimately they also serve as a catalog and a system of record that we can use to really manage these automations going forward. And so to sum it all up, if you want to make a leap to another RPA platform, we can dramatically lower the switching costs so that you can easily and cost effectively manage that migration. And once again, you can leverage the power of these digital blueprints and this common object model. And digital blueprints are also a substantial leap forward just in general around the RPA design and development that really helps accelerate your bot development while increasing quality. And this, which usually ultimately is required as a trade-off, but you no longer need to do that. Blueprint is able to help you build better bots, manage those bots, and migrate those bots. And this is for our customers what's been able to drive ROI across the board from whatever part of their business case, whatever part of the use case in their automation lifecycle where they're currently focused. So with that, I really appreciate you guys letting me take you through that. I want to pause, open it up for any questions that you may have. As Kate mentioned, I think there's a question tab that everyone has access to, so I encourage you to put any questions in there. And I'll pause at a moment here to take any questions that you guys may be curious about.
Great, excellent. Matt, we had actually a bunch of questions come in throughout the course of the webinar, so I'll start with those. So Rajarshi Gupta has asked, can Blueprint export from any of the big 4 RPA providers and convert to any of the others?
Yes, it can. So we've been actually working through quite an excessive list of mapping rules across Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, UiPath, and Power Automate. We have different levels of expertise in each of them. And a lot of that is based on what we've been doing with customers and different partners across the industry. So absolutely.
Okay, great. And Harish has a few questions in here. So they've asked, from UiPath to Blue Prism, will code modularization also be taken care of in the sense of main pages, sub pages, exception pages?
Yes, it will. So one of the key things when you actually import a UiPath project, just to give you an example around UiPath, it will actually bring in all the separate, workflows, frameworks, main flows, exception flows, and it will parse them out as different flows of digital blueprints, and it will link them all together. So all of the modularization that you built into your designs are actually brought into those digital blueprints and ultimately pass through into the new RPA platform. And that in UiPath, that's done through a bunch of different XAML. In Automation Anywhere, that's done across maybe a bunch of ATMXs where you have a master task bot that's calling sub-task bots. The same mechanism holds true, and that's one of the key things with using digital blueprints.
Okay, excellent. And a second question here from Harisha as well has asked, what % of code rework is required post-migration based on your experiences?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And this COM model that we built, it focuses on, again, the idea of a common object model. As it looks across all of the RPA platforms and it looks for the common commands. What are the things that every platform has? The MS Excels, the words, the file management. So a lot of the main things that get mapped are all of the common things you do. There's always some custom code. There's always some custom stuff you're doing for SAP or other applications that usually has to be reworked. That's where you actually get the source code. So let's say you're going from UiPath to Blue Prism, you'll actually see the source UiPath XML in Blue Prism. So what we've seen, in a range of rework is within Blue Prism. If you're migrating from UiPath bot, you'll have anywhere from 20 to 30, 40% rework depending on the complexity and the customization. Again, that's just a variation. It's usually an 80-20 rule. We see 70 to 80% of the commands are always those common commands that get mapped. There's always 20 to 30% of commands that still need to be reworked. And that's, to give you our perspective, we are not aiming to do 100% command mapping. I don't think that's I don't think that's realistic for anyone. So if you ever talk to somebody and they're like, oh, we can map 100% of commands, you are being lied to, because it's not ever going to be possible. The goal here is to map the design, bring over all the source, and recognize that there's always some rework that has to be done, but to minimize that to the customized and bespoke things.
Okay, great. I have a couple questions here from Shubi as well coming through. So we've got first question, does it map the control center data and the work queues, assets, environment, session variables?
Great question. Unfortunately, at this time, it does not. So we focus purely on the process, object, and bot layer. We are not going into the work queue and control center layer.
Okay. And let's see, another question from the same person. Are the conversions largely based on the repository that Blueprint has, and will it get better as more things are added?
So it is based on the repository that Blueprint has. The Blueprint repository starts to improve your ability to centralize all your designs. What I mean by that is you can start with an empty Blueprint repository and migrate your bots. It will 100% work out of the box, because that's what it's designed to do. It brings in your source bot and helps you convert it over. However, as you migrate more bots and you start to get a larger repository of rules, regulations, and policies, every bot you migrate is going to benefit from all that previous knowledge, if that makes sense. So the whole idea is, think about every bot you've built. Blueprint helps you just start to leverage and reuse all that tribal knowledge in subsequent automations, either migrating or even designing new ones.
Okay, great. And the last question here from that Shubi had put in, does the code used for customization get migrated as well? How is that interpreted?
It does get migrated. It is not going to be mapped. So custom code, again, won't, the common object model is not yet to the point it's going to pick up custom code. And that's something that we've, again, made a meaningful choice there not to go into. So we actually bring that over as source code. We will actually send that, let's say it was a source, the source RPA was in UiPath. All the XML that went into those steps that are custom steps, they will come over and be note fields over in Blue Prism with all of the custom XML. So that will be the rework that was asked in a previous question that is going to be focused on.
Okay, great. I've got a couple questions here from a couple different individuals around selectors. How do you take care of selectors when you migrate from Automation Anywhere to Blue Prism? there's no automated way to handle that today. So how do you measure the success when 70% of the coding today is selector based?
So selectors are a big topic for us. We've been working tirelessly to standardize a selector. Standardizing the selector storage is quite easy. With different RPA tools, obviously, we're seeing how they store selectors differently and how we parse them. So selectors are something that are coming over. They are being parsed in the common object model. What we're seeing as we work with some of our partners is we're able to improve how we catch all the different types of selectors and all the different ways that they're parsed and stored. So it is something that's being handled, but it is something that we are learning and discovering more as we start to work more. And Automation Anywhere is one. I know that we still have some learning to do on how to improve that and make it even better and more robust.
Another question here from Rajarshi. Do the companies provide their automation platforms in a standard format like XML, or did Blueprint build some custom parser to read their automations?
So we build custom parsers to read the automations. So we've actually developed a whole discipline. We have different teams that actually have developed skill sets across the entire RPA language set, from obviously the main four, Blue Prism, AA, UiPath, and Power Automate. We have a parser that brings those in and converts them into digital blueprints. So we're able to work with those file formats. We've been partnered with the RPA platforms. So they've been helping us understand and parse those correctly, but they have not created a standardized XML. And that's where these digital blueprints are almost kind of a standardized common language across all the RPA platforms, because it allows us to actually move information across RPA tools.
Okay, perfect. Just a couple more questions here, Matt. We've got Guilherme says, arrived a little bit late for the webinar. I'm not sure if it was explained, but his question is, why should I consider migrating my RPA tools that are already established from one tool to another? My RPAs that are already established from one tool to another?
Very good question. So it was something that we did cover a little earlier. To summarize it, there's the migrating of RPA is something of I don't want to say a new revelation, but it's something that's happening as the RPA landscape continues to grow and become more commoditized. So for example, we have systems like Power Automate that are coming in and making themselves much more available and widely available to customers. So you get organizations where they're looking at the spend of their yearly license that they have to pay, or their recurring contract paid to each of these RPA vendors, and they're looking at just simply how we can reduce that spend, how we can reduce that cost. So that's one factor. We have quite a few companies and quite a few organizations out there that, by virtue of mergers and acquisitions, or just how their RPA grew across different lines of business, they have multiple RPA tools. So it's a consolidation effort. And then in some cases, you have organizations that are just trying to, they believe that they picked the wrong platform to start with, and they want to go to a different platform, be it because some platforms have recently gone public, or some platforms are doing things like migrating from on-premise to a hosted option. So there's a variety of choices and factors. We are by no means saying that you must migrate RPA. It's just a use case in a scenario that's coming up a lot more in the industry, and it's something that we've been helping customers with for quite some time, and we just wanted to share it with you guys. So hopefully that answers your question, and I definitely encourage you to go back through the presentation as we share this out, because it does touch on some of those things in more detail.
Yes, exactly. So we will be sharing a copy of this recording. You'll probably receive it in the next day or so, just so we can get it cleaned up and make sure we get it sent out to all of you. A few more questions here, some around licensing. So is this capability included in the Enterprise Automation Suite, or is it a separate license? And then another individual has asked, how is the licensing? Is it per user?
Very good question. So everything I've shown you today is part of Blueprint's Enterprise Automation Suite. It is one licensing model. Everything is included in there. It is not licensed by user. It's actually licensed by what we would call a digital blueprint. So you probably saw in the demo, I had to convert one of those processes that we wanted to migrate into a digital blueprint. That was actually the act of me using a license. So essentially, these digital blueprints are going to start mapping to your individual automations or processes. There is an unlimited user package, meaning you can have as many people in the system as you want. You can even import as many bots as you want. But when you start migrating those automations or you start building new automations, that's when you start to consume those digital blueprints. So the way Blueprint is licensed is by the digital blueprint, and Blueprint is actually sold similar to the RPA platforms in packages of digital blueprints.
Perfect. Two more real questions here. A question from Abhinav. How do you migrate a metabot in Automation Anywhere which is locked and you can't get to the source code?
Very good question. So in Automation Anywhere, in most of these automations, what you're going to be actually doing is importing, the source file. So for example, you would be exporting an ATMX, you'd be importing that ATMX. When it's locked, as long as you can open the ATMX, you can usually import it. That's something that if you have an example or scenario you'd like to go through, I encourage you to reach out to us. I'd love to take you through that example. But in most cases, because it's all file-based, you can actually import them. As we start to get into more of the systems like A360 or Power Automate, that's where you can get into a bit of the locking situation, but we haven't encountered that as of yet. So in the scenario of a metabot in Automation Anywhere, you would just be importing the ATMX file for that metabot and it would bring it in.
Excellent. We've got here from Shubi, do you need to get trained on Blueprint like any other RPA platform, and do you have a trial version?
So Blueprint does have training. It is not to the same level as an RPA tool, because RPA platforms, again, they're development environments, so there's a lot more training. Blueprint is more akin and more in line with what people are used to doing in things like Word, Excel, Visio, and PowerPoint. So the training and enablement for customers is like a 2-week engagement that we have with teams. We will get them in there, we will get them onboarded, we'll take them through training and enablement, and they will be off to the races very quickly. And sorry, I forgot the second part of that question.
Do we have a trial version?
Blueprint does not have a free trial version on our website, but we do perform validation exercises and proof of value exercises with folks today. So if you're curious and interested in how Blueprint can help you, I encourage you to reach out, and we would definitely work with you guys to help set up an engagement so you could go through and validate that Blueprint is the right fit for you.
Perfect. And Rajarshi's got a question. Could the RPA companies encrypt these files and make it unreadable for Blueprint?
They definitely could. There definitely could be some encryption, and that's part of why we partnered directly with the RPA platforms. With many of those RPA platforms, Blueprint is filling a gap in that they don't have in their tool chain. So you look at systems like UiPath that have a whole suite of tools. They have from discovery tools, they have obviously the UiPath Studio, but they don't have anything in this space of design. So with every one of these RPA platforms, we have a very healthy partnership at the technical level and the product level that keeps us engaged and allows us to work with those companies to help us not only improve their customers, but in some cases help them migrate competitive products and competitive situations over to them, and vice versa. So yes, there could definitely be encryption that could come along. Part of our partnership and engagement with these customers is to work with them, because at the end of the day, we're trying to make their customers more successful and ultimately get them to leverage the licenses that they procured and get them working in the digital worker farm that they have set up.
Excellent. Last call for questions here.
Awesome.
All right, well, it looks like that's it for today. Well, thank you so much, Matt. That was a fantastic presentation. And for everyone on the line, thank you so much for giving us your time this afternoon, or whatever time it is where you're coming to us from. We will be sending out a copy of the recording shortly, so keep an eye on your inbox tomorrow. And if you have any questions, you can reply directly to that email. We'll put a demo request link in there, or you can reply to info@blueprintsys.com, and we would be more than happy to do a more in-depth presentation specific to the needs of your organization. So I guess with that being said, we'll wish everyone a wonderful, wonderful day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you on the next call. Take care.
Take care, everyone.